Love Your Kitchen, Designing the Heart of the Home, proudly sponsored by Blum, the podcast where we explore the art of crafting your dream kitchen. I'm your host, Faye Newman, a freelance kitchen designer with a passion for creating spaces that truly reflect the heart of the home. So it just shows you the versatility behind a painted door range or a company like this. Whether you found the venting hob yourself or if your designer is researching this for you, just make sure you're both aware of how deep that model sits within that cabinet. And what's quite nice about these is they're actually not as heavy as a lot of the ones that I see. So some of them are actually too heavy to try and take out. I get asked this question all the time from clients, how can I light the space so that it's not just a grid of spotlights at the top? And this is a great way of doing that. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Love Your Kitchen podcast. As ever, thank you very much for joining me. So today I'm in one of Olive & Bar's showrooms and I'm going to talk through one of their beautiful timeless kitchen displays today, just to talk through sort of the thought process behind the design, how this design and display actually came about, because it's a really fun story, and also just key design features that you can consider and bring into your own kitchen design, and hopefully help you with the whole sort of layout ideology and things like that. So firstly, I'll tell you about the story of how this kitchen display actually came about. So originally, it was designed and made to be on an exhibition stand in Grand Designs 2023, the one in London. And it was featured in their grand house. So they had a really good spot at that exhibition. The colour scheme currently in this display, we've got London Clay on both the island and then the T&G back panels. And then we've got Stirabout, which is like a warm sort of neutral on the tool sections, and then the base cabinetry going in sort of like an L around the back wall. So we've got a lovely two-tone sort of modern take on a sort of country style kitchen, which is great. But when it was actually at Grand Designs, it was in Sudbury yellow, which is just wild to think that, the same furniture that you've got here, it would just look completely different in such a bright, vibrant colour. So it just shows you the versatility behind a painted door range or company like this, especially if you've got cups and knobs like we've got on this one, or all of the sort of the drill holes will be, you've only got one drill hole to think about as opposed to two if you've got a bar, when it can be slightly different. So it's really easy to just give it, a new lease of life, and it just means that the kitchen can sort of ever evolve with you, sort of as you're going on, within that house, and it just saves kitchens going into landfill if they just want to be given a new lease of life. To give you a little bit of a background of sort of the furniture style and the cabinetry sort of behind the door as well, that gives it sort of the timeless nature that we've just mentioned. So it's an in-frame structure, which means that it's got a framework running all the way around the door, and then the door on the inside opens, so it sits within that frame. They've got working butt hinges, and then on the inside they've got an oak veneer. So they buy this in like as a raw material, and then they actually apply their own sort of 3 coats of lacquer on the inside, and that's purely just from a durability perspective. But equally, the oak veneer elements just work so beautifully for their style of kitchens, because they're all whether it's a modern take on a sort of an in-frame kitchen, or whether it's a real sort of country like traditional kitchen, they change everything sort of with some of their door styles. So they do have a skinny shaker available as well, but mainly the construction is sort of what you're seeing sort of on this display now. It just lends itself to the sort of the oak cabinetry on the inside, the dovetail drawer boxes as well, but also something that I absolutely love about their cabinets is on the inside where we've got the adjustable holes for the shelves. They've actually almost got like a little rivet around it, just to make that a little bit more durable and to save the sort of look or the visual of having a sort of unfinished sort of drill hole, which sometimes you just get on the sides, which again lends itself to the little shelf peg. So you can still use that and move that up and down from a function perspective, but think it just looks a little bit nicer how they finished that, which is great. What gives it a little bit more of a country feel is they actually continue the frame all the way down, which again, I think is quite a nice touch. And again, it just almost makes each cabinet sort of freestanding. So that's why it lends itself to, you know, to the timeless sort of nature and the aesthetic that you're sort of looking at. Also from a durability perspective, what they do from a paint, which I think is really, really important, whatever sort of supplier or, you know, whoever you're looking at to go for a timeless kitchen, couple of things to think about would be 100% would be to make sure that the primer underneath is colour matched to the actual colour on the top coat of the surface. So you might be thinking, if you are going for the Stirabout, you know, colour, it's quite a light neutral colour. So if you had like a white base coat under, or the primer underneath that, it won't be as noticeable. But even so, if you can get a colour matched primer underneath, if you just chip away or scratch, you know, a hairline scratch in the surface or the top surface, it just means that you're not going to see sort of a, you know, a big white line coming down that. But especially, I would say this is more prevalent if you are introducing, whether it's on the full kitchen or just the island and the back panelling like this. If you are incorporating a dark colour, it's imperative to make sure that you are looking at the base tone underneath and just making sure that it is colour matched, because if not, say if you had a beautiful big island like this, I mean, this kitchen warrants itself for, you know, a big family. You've got a beautiful big island, you've got an L-shaped section going all the way around with lots of storage options, and it's got, you know, that design element because you've got the T&G panelling as well. But it lends itself to be in like a busy, you know, family environment. And so if you've got people, you know, kids sort of skateboarding round and whatever and knocking the corners of these, you'll really notice it if it's got a white undercoat. So that is something that I would make sure that you speak to your supplier about, and just make sure that, or just check that that is the case for the furniture. Let's talk about now the key features that are incorporated on this design. So to give some clarity of what we've got, if we start in sort of from right to left, we've got a cabinet with a fridge freezer in, like a tall cabinet. Then we've got a combination microwave and grill and a single oven stacked in the tower. And then you've got L-shape sort of base cabinetry going all the way around the back. We've got the sink section on the back wall, which always lends itself well in that position. And then we've got a dresser cabinet in the corner, and then a large, big family island. The first topic, or I'd say probably the showcase of the design, is a large family island that we've got here. It's got drawers all the way along the one side where the hob is. The hob is centralised and it's flush fitted, which again is always quite desirable, and it just is another feature that makes it more durable, because you're not hitting sort of, if you're putting a pan down, you don't have to worry about it sort of hitting the sides as much or catching as much. But also it just looks, you know, a little bit more considered and part of the kitchen more, rather than having anything sort of a framework or anything around your, you know, your hobs. Before I talk more about the specific hob that they've used within this display, one of the main features that I really liked about this design was how sort of the seating layout is, but then also how it's encased with sort of two bookends either side. So I think sometimes when you're looking at designing your island furniture and sort of the layout of that, you're thinking, so especially if you've got an appliance on the one side like this has, you're thinking function on that side with all of the drawers, and then of course the hob is centralised. But then the other side, I always think sort of where the seating section is, because that's a little bit more playful, you can be a bit more fun that side. It's always nice to add sort of a quirky or a bit of personality there, and I think these bookends do just that. So you've got your drawers at the front, and then the other side, they've got reduced depth cabinetry, and then they've got bookends to the full depth, and then the worktop sits over the top. So again, it's just a nice space to, or a little nook to, you know, put your legs under and, you know, have that conversation with somebody if they're at the hob. You know, creating that really immersive environment for everybody involved, whether you're hosting or whether you're trying to encourage your children to do some homework. Again, the high stalls like this is a great way to sort of keep an eye on them, but then still, you know, maybe be able to help them sort of while you're cracking on with getting the dinner sorted for everybody as well. But What's great about these bookends, which I really enjoy, is they're painted all out of the same furniture colour, so that you've still got the framework coming all the way down, but also the edges of the cabinetry is still hidden by the frame, so it's still sort of encased in the same framework running around the main bits of the furniture, which again, I just think works really well. What's really fun about having the bookends there is having a few books just adds a bit of colour to the space as well. It just starts to make it a little bit more personalised to you guys, and it's just a great spot or just a great feature to add if you are looking to go for sort of a similar sort of format like this. Something else that I do like adding sort of that side of the island is also like a wine cooler, or any sort of more decorative piece of furniture on that side. It's quite a nice place to add those maybe less used or more display cabinets, especially as base cabinets, because of course if they're raised on the wall, you've got your wall cabinetry and your dressers where you can add a little bit more of a playful element to those as well. But if we're talking islands, usually that's the best place to do that, sort of where the seating section is. But also as well, you've also got really great useful storage, specifically sort of where your legs go under, because you've still got the reduced depth cabinets. So yes, they might not be used for everyday storage, because obviously you've got to move the stall out to get to it. But equally, if you've got any particular tableware for Christmas and you don't have anywhere else to put it, or maybe you've got just like endless amounts of Tupperware, you could just store, those sections in there that you don't need every day, but you don't necessarily want to move it into another room. It just gives you that option, and make sure that you're maximising the space as much as possible. Something to note as well, if you are going for a venting hob like this, usually you do need either a sort of a void space behind it, or to incorporate a cabinet like that, purely just because of the way that whether you're venting or ducting, the way that it's sort of the system works behind that hob. So just to give you some insight on how these work, because I was speaking to a client recently about this that wanted to go for a venting hob, but against a wall. You don't necessarily have to, you can have it so that the back section turns back into the cabinet, and then goes down, and then it's almost like a C. So you've got a section coming out the back, and then it turns on a 90 degrees down at a bend and then out to the wall, or the external wall, or it carries on as a C, so it sort of 90-degree bends back to you, and then you've got a little plinth vent, underneath. So that's mainly if you're going for like a filter or something like that. Something to note with this is, as I mentioned, you can do that obviously within the cabinet. However, it's taking up some of your storage so that you won't have sort of workable drawers, etc. underneath there. So best practice, if you can, especially on an island, and if you're lucky enough to have quite a deep space like we've got in this showroom, make sure that you are accounting for either panelling at the back with a void at the back. Usually it's about 150 mil, depending on the model that you're going for, just for that 90 degrees bend sort of going down, or to create that C shape coming back to your feet as well, if you are looking to go down the recirculating route. If you are looking to do this up against a wall, again, see if you can make the furniture deeper on that side to account for it. If not, in the past, it's not best practice, but there are certain models where you can just duct it straight out as well. But again, it's all about making sure that the hob supplier is, happy with how that ducting's working, because then if it affects the model, your warranty might be void as well. So it's just making sure that your kitchen designer is working with the supplier of all of the appliances, and continually, looking at the different specs and things to make sure that all of the decisions you're all good with, and it won't affect your warranty. So now we're on the topic of the hob, just to talk you through this specific model. It's the Bora X Pure model. As I mentioned, it's flush mounted. So again, it just looks like it's built into the island a little bit more, or the work surface. And what I love about the X Pure model is that it's got invisible buttons at the front. So sometimes you can still see the buttons at the front, even if the appliance is turned off. But with this model, I think Bora just wanted to sort of make it as minimal, sleek as possible, which is why they've chose to opt down the route of having the sort of invisible sort of display at the front. And again, it just makes everything look a little bit more seamless and less cluttered. Also as well, this particular model has a really low sort of noise level. So if you've got a big open plan space, like I can imagine this kitchen would suit beautifully in. If you're in different areas of the room, sometimes they can get quite loud. So it's nice to know that, you know, or when you are looking down the route of which venting hob to go down, look at going for, you know, quite a low noise, especially as well if you've got pets, because naturally their hearing is a lot better than, you know, us as humans. So it might be a case of it's quite distressing for them as well, and you don't actually know, you know, what's causing that. Something to note with a venting hob is the back's not only affected, but also the drawer underneath. Whether you found the venting hob yourself or if your designer is researching this for you, just make sure you're both aware of how that model sits within that cabinet. You should still be able to have like a working drawer underneath it. But what's great about this X Pure model is I believe it only comes down 200mm actually under the work surface. Naturally, that will be affected if you go for a thinner work surface material. But equally, it just means that you're maximising your drawer space underneath as well. That's one thing that I do really like about Bora as a, you know, as a brand. They do sort of think outside of the box and, you know, really make each appliance and think about the needs for each homeowner, you know, using their appliances really thoroughly. So again, it just works well and allows everybody to have optimized storage as well as, you know, it just looking sleek and beautiful like this. Something to note as well is they've actually brought out a matte version of this model. So all induction hobs are always really shiny, but naturally if it's a touch screen like most of them are now, which you might not like either, you know, and that's a conversation to have with yourself. But I think touchscreen is definitely, you know, the way forward or the most popular choice. Naturally, you get lots of finger marks on it. So I think obviously Bora's foreseen that and is now coming out with different sort of, you know, textures and matte finishes in order to hopefully, you know, minimise or to get rid of the finger marks altogether. Another point that I wanted to sort of bring into play in this design is the T&G panelling at the back. You've got your base furniture at a standard, usually sort of 600mm deep. We've got a small, say, 80mm upstand behind that. Then you've got the T&G panelling up sort of by 500mm. And then we've got a cornice underneath to act as sort of the support for this particular shelf. And then the shelf itself is made out of the same worktop material. And then you've got a little bit more T&G panelling at the top, and then it's finished with like a beautiful sort of detailing at the top just to make sure that there's no exposed edge. But what's great about this is, and something that I definitely look into when you are sort of looking and choosing your furniture suppliers or where they're sourcing certain materials in, if you're using a joiner or if you're using a company similar to Olive and Bar, is make sure that, you know, the boards are made or can be made sort of any size. Naturally, there's going to be constraints, but I mean, this is a really big T&G panelling at the back here. And what's great about it is you haven't got any sort of vertical joins, or we're not having to butt up two panels together. So again, it just adds to that overall, you know, seamless aesthetic. If you are working with a company where that isn't possible, it might be a case of sourcing the T&G boards yourself and then trying to colour match it, or seeing if they can hide the joins sort of within the groove here. I think with sort of the, you know, a handmade company sort of similar to this, having everything painted on site really helps with all of those finishing touches, especially not just there, but also like on your cornice. So when your cornices meet, it's normally on what's called a mitre joint. And no matter how amazing your fitter is and how, you know, tight that joint can be, it's always best practice to be able to sort of fill those in afterwards. And then paint it over, so therefore you've got a completely seamless and uninterrupted paint finish. So that's something, you know, one point that I really thought would be helpful for you moving forward with your kitchen design. Also as well, I like that because we're in a two-toned environment, it's nice that it's an opportunity to add in the London Clay, you know, in different areas of the room. So you've obviously got it on the island, but it just brings the two-tone nature together. I think sometimes if you go for a two-tone kitchen, sometimes it's literally just, you know, maybe a neutral colour like this is on the back section, and then you've got a bright colour, you know, for the island, but then there's no other reference of that bright colour, you know, anywhere else in the house. Even if maybe you wanted to continue your worktop up to where the shelf is, even still just having the little T&G panelling at the top would be a really lovely reference. Or if you're sort of like, you know, you love the look of a more timeless sort of traditional kitchen, but you just think that's too many lines for you maybe, or it's just, you know, some clients are just like, I'm just not a fan of the T&G. Look to add that sort of tone within sort of pictures or, you know, other areas of the room, just so, again, everything's tying in really nicely. But personally, I am a T&G fan, so that's why I think I am loving this back section going along here. To talk about a few more of the finishing touches within this space as well. So I referenced before that we've got cups and knobs, which again just lends itself to this style of kitchen so well. They're easy to change if you ever want to, but also it is just a quirky feature of having all of your knobs on all of your hinge doors, and then all of you on your drawers to have either one or two of the cup handles, obviously, to open those. The handle finish that they've chosen for this particular kitchen display is aged brass. So this aged brass is one that just stays the same colour. Sometimes you can get some sort of living finishes where it sort of ages with you as you go. And again, that warrants a beautiful timeless kitchen like this. But it's great to see as well that you don't have to go for, you know, really shiny handles to make sure that it's not a living brass sort of finish. It just shows that you can still get a really nice aesthetic if you're not keen on going for, you know, the living brass where it sort of ages with you. But again, it just works so beautifully. I mean, the butt hinges, particularly here as well, like marry up to that. So yes, it's not the exact same colour, similar to the actual tap itself, but again, they're all similar tones. So again, as a scheme, it just works really well. Another great feature for this particular kitchen is the Belfast sink that they've chosen. So this is 800ml wide, but it's actually a single bowl sink as opposed to a double bowl. I think there's pros and cons to this. I think if you've got really big pots and pans, they're quite long. Again, this works really beautifully. Or if you're literally just rinsing and then pull it into the dishwasher, that works really well. Something to note that if you are going for a single bowl is if you're looking to do a lot of sort of washing up sort of within that facility, you've got to think about the amount of water, shall we say, that's needed in order to sort of fill that up tall enough to, you know, to wash your big pots and pans. But equally, some clients just prefer the, you know, the simplicity and to go for sort of the one bowl sink as well. Or as I mentioned, if you do sort of, you know, want to rinse off your big pots and things before then popping them in the dishwasher, it just means that you haven't got any sort of central section to think about. Maybe you don't want it to chip or things like that. Also as well with this particular cabinet, and I think this is sort of more apparent if you're going down, you know, the handmade route with timeless kitchens, is they've actually got a cabinet that has the framework thickness around the sink. So sometimes, dependent on which sort of suppliers you're going for, sometimes they're 18mm panels, or you can sort of replicate that with sort of 50mm posts going down. But what's lovely about this is you've almost got sort of a H shape for then the bowl of the Belfast to sit into. So you've got the framework running along the top of the doors at the bottom and then on the bottom of the doors. But you've also got the two verticals going down either side as well. So again, it's just encasing it beautifully, and it just looks a little bit more considered as well. So that's something really great to sort of think about from a visual perspective when you are sort of making these design choices for yourself. Something else which looks and just functions really well is having the 800ml cabinet in the middle, but then having the 600ml bin to the left of that, and then 600ml dishwasher to the right hand side. When I'm designing kitchens, that is, if we've got, you know, the space in order to do that, that is a no-brainer to do really, because you're scraping into your bin on the left-hand side. You can rinse away if you need to. A lot of dishwasher models, you don't need to rinse as much now because they're a lot more efficient than the older models. And then, you know, you pop it straight into the dishwasher to the right-hand side there. So again, from a function perspective and layout perspective, it just works really well. Also with Belfast sinks, which looks quite nice, is you can have draining grooves on both sides as well. And sometimes it looks really lovely to actually step out some of the furniture. And you don't necessarily have to sort of, you know, pay for deeper cabinets there, you can just see if your fitter can bring them out sort of by 50mm or however big sort of the pilasters are going down the sides. And it again just gives it a nice feature. So for instance, on a back wall like this, which is straight and flat sort of at the moment, it could give it sort of some definition to come out from there. If you are looking to do that, things that you need to think about is naturally you'll probably have 2 joins. You know, if you're going for a solid sort of quartz worktop like this. Also as well, just make sure you've got the depth in order to do that. I mean, we're only speaking sort of 50mm, but again, if we're going back to sort of the venting hobs that we spoke about before, where you actually need quite a bit of space behind them in order for the, you know, the sort of the filter or the ducting kits to go down the back. Just make sure that you've accounted for the overall sort of depth of the room as well, and that's not eating up too much into your walkways. So if you had a galley kitchen, for instance, and you've got quite a tight sort of walkway in between, even though it looks great from a design perspective, I'd probably say if you've only got sort of 900mm space, because you've still got to think about your bin opening, you standing behind it, or somebody else, you know, walking sort of past or past it while you're sort of in, you know, scraping away inside of it to the side, or especially your dishwasher, if you've pulled your dishwasher down, you want to obviously make sure that you've got enough space sort of around that appliance as well, and it's not too squashed. Another way to add sort of a different colour within a scheme like this is to expose some of the wooden elements. So you could do this if you wanted to with your bookcase ends, for instance, rather than going for the painted interior, you can go for the oak veneer, which is, you know, throughout all of the kitchen. But what's quite nice with this particular display as well, if they've got a big tray at the bottom, which again is just really popular, in the same sort of wood tone as the actual cabinetry on the inside, but also a chopping board at the top as well. And what's quite nice about these is they're actually not as heavy as a lot of the ones that I see. So some of them are actually too heavy to try and take out. But again, it just gives you, obviously there's a function to both of those. So if you're, you know, you don't want to allocate a, you know, specific cupboard to have lots of plastic trays in, you prefer the look of the wooden trays like this. It just, again, is a design feature that can elevate your design and make it look more personalised to you, but also just still serves a function. And again, with the chopping boards as well, so having this sort of setup near where you're like plating up or where you're, you know, you're doing your prep work, again, just works really well. But I do also work with clients where that is literally just for show as well. So it depends how you use the space. But again, it just works really beautifully. And then you've still got the in-frame framework running around that as well. So it looks nice and integrated within the furniture. We've got 2 of those either side on this particular layout. And then on the end section, we've got a beautiful dresser, which again is just a nice way to either, you know, have your sort of your tableware that maybe you don't use as much, or maybe it might be a case of that's where your everyday tableware is, so having that near your cooking section just works really well. The dresser that's on this particular display as well, we've got T&G paneling on the side, so it's marrying up beautifully with the back paneling. But also the interior is painted the same as the other 2-tone colour, so the London Clay. So again, it's just adding another reference to a 2-tone kitchen like this, but equally as well, it just shows that, you know, it's another design feature that showcases that dresser beautifully. Having those in clear glass, again, just works really well, and it just showcases the different colour on the inside of that as well, which is a reference to the London Clay in the other areas of the space. Now let's talk about the work surface, because the work surface actually, even though it's not vertical, so you can't see it, you know, as much, it takes up a lot of the space within your kitchen design. So it's a really, you know, interesting and important decision to make in the overall sort of cohesive look of the space. This one in particular is Soilstone's Ethereal Glow, which is 30mm thick, and actually applied on top of it is sort of like a leather effect, which means that it's not polished. I can see sort of the pros and cons to this. I think it's, you know, adding different textures onto the actual work surface is a really interesting way to add, again, a difference to your kitchen, so it's not just, you know, the same sort of shiny, polished look. But personally, I would, if you can, make sure that if you were opting for either like a suede or you know, like a leather sort of finish like this, just sort of run your hands over it and make sure that you're happy with the sensory or element of the actual material, because it can be quite, you know, different to the polish that we're all sort of used to. But something to note about just quartz in general, because I always have clients question the debate of, you know, your granite, your quartzes, your marble. Quartz as a whole is just, you know, far less porous than say like your natural granites. You can have different densities in your granites, however, but best practice is, because quartz is a resin-based material, just means that one, because it's man-made, you can get a lovely consistent pattern, especially if you're looking to book match any ends. But two, it just means that the resin sort of within the core of it allows it to be less porous. So if you're spilling any red wine or turmeric or anything that's really prone to staining, again, quartz is just, you know, a really popular choice because of the durability of the material. Also, it's really low maintenance as well, which I think we all just love in this sort of era that we're living in, when we're all super busy and, you know, we can barely get through the day trying to do our own sort of, you know, working lives and then trying to cook healthily and all these amazing things that we're trying to do in one day. So it's nice that you don't have to think about it being sealed at a later date or anything like that. So again, that is also why quartz is a really popular finish. Some quartz, sort of if you are making sort of quartz like with a matte effect or a different sort of finish, sometimes they will still need to be sealed. So just make sure that you're confirming that with your worktop supplier, just to make sure that obviously you're not, that isn't something that you know, you think of later on, or you're noticing that, oh, actually, you know, it looks like it's taken a little bit more into the material than it should be. Make sure that you're aware that it's actually a finish that doesn't need to be sealed at any point. The last point I want to sort of make on this beautiful design is the lighting chosen. So we have got a few spotlights sort of dotted about, but naturally it's always, lighting's a really great way to, again, elevate your design, like make it look a little bit less like built in, if that makes sense. I don't know whether that's the right terminology or not, but it just allows you to add more textures, like different finishes, as we mentioned with sort of the brass finishes, you know, in different elements of the room. The particular lights that we've got here are the Carnaby Etch pendant lights from Solo Lighting. 3 beautiful pendant lights over the island. There's always that debate on how many to go for, but I think because these are really elegant and they're quite small in width, and because we've got such a big, beautiful island, you know, 3 dotted sort of across and centralised works so perfectly. Also as well, because we're going for a venting hob, or we have done in the middle of the island, it just means that you're not having to think about any extraction sort of above. It allows you to have sort of free reign with how you're presenting the lights above that. Also, what I love is they've also incorporated these coming off from the wall as well. And I get asked this question all the time from clients, you know, how can I light the space so that it's not just a grid of spotlights at the top? And this is a great way of doing that. So incorporating sort of, you know, wall lights coming off the wall there. Obviously, things you've got to think about is if you've got wall cabinets and that light sat above, because they're 300mm deep, it's not going to emit any light down to the work surface, which you'll need from a task perspective. But the reason why these work so well within this design is because you've got the paneling at the back. So even though that's brought forward slightly, it's still not covering light emissions sort of coming down. So again, it just works really well from there. And also it just adds different details and it makes it a little bit more fun. And I think when you're going for sort of a shelved element like this, you can really, you know, think about those placements. And it might be a case of you don't want shelves everywhere. You might want cabinetry along the one wall and then sort of shelves coming off it just at the back section by where you've got like your sink. Or it might be a case of you've got sort of part wall cabinetry, but then you like the look of like a little shelf or 2 maybe lights like this in a certain area. Again, it's where you can be playful, and having sort of the, you know, design CGI renders and things like that to sort of show you those placements or even just elevations of the space. It just allows you to see sort of how that will work. What's also really beautiful about these particular lights is because it's got the etched glass element, which almost looks reeded, and it's in 3 different layers. As I mentioned, it's a really elegant, I think it's a French inspired design. But what's really nice is, you know, when you've got it sort of against a wall, you can see the different patterns and things above it. So if you've got it sort of, you know, quite close to the ceiling, you can see sort of the light emitted sort of around it. So again, it just looks a little bit more elegant, looks a little bit more considered, and it just means that you haven't just got one spotlight coming down. It sort of is like a warm glow. So again, just goes with the overall tone and design for this particular kitchen. I hope you found all of this sort of the different design discussions today, you know, helpful for your upcoming kitchen projects. I think it's quite nice sometimes just to see, you know, different design examples. Maybe you want to incorporate all of them. Maybe you like a couple of the sort of the key points that we've spoken about today, especially from the durability and the practical element. Or maybe it's just a case of, you know, you just enjoy these conversations and then seeing how different rooms and different spaces can work. As I always say at the end of every episode, if you've got any questions, if anything's triggered you today and you think, actually, yeah, I would love to know more about this, please do let us know. Either drop us a comment, you know, wherever you're sort of watching. If it's a case of you're listening, drop me a DM and then we can get them answered on the show. So thank you as always for watching, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you have liked what we have spoken about, why not like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, what you can do is click on the notification bell to keep yourself notified of all the new content to come.